Now premiering on the Studio DNA network, Sif Pop Writers Room, a new show consisting of the writers of sifpop.com. On a rotating basis, we'll be discussing some classic movies we're watching for the first time, some comic book movies, some nostalgic movies, and what TV shows we're currently watching. But each week, we'll also be taking a look at the movies that are coming out soon and give our thoughts on how we think they will turn out. If you love movies, Sif Pop Writers Room is the place to be. So come on in and we will pull up a chair for you.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 34 of Disney Plus Reviews. I'm one of your co-hosts, Phil Souza. I'm not here with Jack today, but I am here with my good friends, Grant $1 Million Youngsma. What's up, Grant?
Not much, Phil.
If you're just joining us for this podcast, we are an unofficial Disney Plus podcast reviewing the most popular stuff on Disney Plus and some movies you maybe have never heard of before or seen before, like the movie we're talking about today. I'm very excited to check this one out. Today we are reviewing Blank Check, a 1994 comedy movie. I guess if you were going to I'm going to read the synopsis here in a second, but if you're going to compare this to other movies, especially like of the same decade, it's got an element of Home Alone,
Richie Rich.
Any movie where it's like empowering a young kid. I thought of another like terrible movie that I've done on a different podcast, the horrible movie podcast, Kazam. It's really similar to Kazam. So that kind of a kids comedy movie. It is not as good as Home Alone.
No.
but it is kind of in that same kind of genre. Here's the synopsis on Disney Plus. It says, when 11-year-old Preston's bike is run over, he thinks it's his unlucky day. But when a settlement puts a blank check in his hand, quick-thinking Preston fills it in for $1 million. Now he has his own pad, his own limo driver, and is spending the money like crazy. He soon finds out that the only problem with having $1 million is keeping it, especially when everyone is after the loot. So I feel like that's a pretty good synopsis, kind of summarizes what the movie's about. Before we get into anything, I want to give you this warning. We say this on every episode, but if you're just tuning in for this episode, we spoil the entire contents of the movie, front to back. We're not going to be shy about covering every spoiler. Not that this is like a heavy, I don't want to be spoiled movie, but we will talk about the movie front and back. So if you've not seen the movie and you care about that, then maybe hit pause, go watch the movie, come back. Or if you don't care, if you've seen it before, then continue on with us. We're going to jump into it. So before we get into kind of favorite scenes, and I want to talk about actors and just kind of overall plot and stuff like that. What's your history with this movie? I watched it literally for the first time today. So,
well, I watched it probably first when I was probably in middle school. So early 2000s, and then it was on Netflix for a little while, so saw it again, and then this was my first time watching it on Disney Plus last night.
Okay, so when was the last time that you saw it?
Probably 3 years ago.
Okay, not too long.
Yeah.
Okay. Your wife, Caitlin. So I failed to mention this at the beginning of the top of the show, but you've been on several other episodes, and I think most of those have been with Caitlin. Has Caitlin also watched this?
Yes.
Okay. What are her overall thoughts?
Her thoughts, as far as Disney movies go, we kind of grouped this in with like Cool Runnings, The Mighty Ducks, Heavyweights, Big Green, and some other ones. She probably finds it in like the middle. She really likes Mighty Ducks. This one she'll watch and she enjoys it, but it's probably not her favorite one.
Yeah. We're going to get into movie details here in a second, so we might as well just cover this now. But what's her favorite scene, or what does she like about the movie just in general?
I think she likes kind of the Home Alone / Richie Rich aspect of it, where the bad guys get what they deserve.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's probably her favorite part.
Yeah. So basically I see we'll kind of talk generally, I guess, about the movie. I really see this movie as like child's fantasy type of movie. Like it's Spy Kids. It's any movie that like kids can watch it and go, man, I want to be that kid. We covered Kazam on the Horrible Movie podcast a month or two ago. So I just watched that movie for the first time. And it's very similar. It's like, okay, kid, if you were 10 or 11 and you had 3 wishes, what would you do? And of course, the first thing he wishes for is just like all the candy in the world, and like it just literally rains candy. So like the kinds of things that a kid would do with $1 million, I think is probably the most enticing part of the movie for me. And I wasn't that age in '94. I was 14. And so, but pretty close, like 3 years, 3 years older than this kid. And so it was fun watching this movie with like remembering my 1994 eyes. Like when I was I guess I was entering high school, or I think it was a freshman or sophomore in high school. Like how I would have maybe made a lot of the same decisions, like the racetrack, the VR games, like all that kind of stuff. Like I probably would have done the exact same thing with $1 million.
The water slide.
Yeah. Like all the awesome things that are like a dream for any kid. You get to realize that dream through this movie, even though you're not the kid, you get to watch it through his eyes. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And it's kind of goes along with the Disney or the Home Alone type genre where the kid's not the most popular in the world.
Yeah.
He kind of gets picked on by other friends and his family. So it kind of fits along in that genre.
Yeah, it is kind of like the kid that's not getting his way in life gets his way all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And like he's even picked on by his brothers. Like his brothers are kind of jerks, kind of a la Home Alone, really. And, pick on him, call him names, and generally just kind of thumb him down. And then I don't know how would you describe the relationship between him and his dad? Because it's aggressive sometimes. Like his dad is like harder on him. I feel like he's harder on him, on Preston, than his older brothers.
Yeah.
And he almost admits as much at the end of the movie when he doesn't know that he's talking to Macintosh, who doesn't exist. But Macintosh is in that tall chair. I mean, it's Preston in that tall chair, and he's talking to Macintosh about being, I should have been a better father, or should have been there for my kids more, or whatever. But I don't know. Like, how would you describe? I guess he's just a neglectful father, kind of.
And I think he kind of sees a lot more of himself in Preston.
Okay.
Because like he talks about how he thinks that Preston should be running his own business at this point because he was running his own business. I think it's more like that. And like you said, I don't think he has as high of expectations for Preston's brothers as he does for Preston. So I think he goes a little bit harder on him.
Okay. That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about that line. I think the relationships in the movie are a huge part of the movie. Like this is a comedy, kind of. There are like 20-minute sections that are not funny. Like not even trying to be funny. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a drama or a comedy, but and then we'll get to it later, but there's like a romantic element to it, which is a little weird to talk about. We'll talk about that. It involves an 11-year-old and a 20-something-year-old woman, and they're kind of semi-romantic escapades. We'll talk about that in depth later. But yeah, I think the relationships are core to the message of the movie. And I mean, you can pull a couple messages out, I think, but the one that I kind of got was, I mean, the obvious one I think is money, and just how you can buy friends until the money runs out, and then all your friends are going to leave you because they were only there for the money to begin with. But there's also an element of, not to quote the Beatles, but like all you need is love, all you need is relationships, and money isn't going to give you the happiness that you really desire. At the end of the movie, he has a birthday and he says, "Okay, make a wish. Before you blow out your candles, what could you want?" And he's like, "I don't. What else could I want? I have everything I need right here." He's looking at his family. So I think those are kind of the main themes of the movie, and obviously they don't hit as hard if he's like the popular kid in school at the beginning of the film. So. In fact, you're kind of reminded throughout the movie that he doesn't have any real friends. Yeah. Like even throughout the movie, like Henry is kind of his best friend. Yeah. And he's like paid. He's paid to hang out with him. So, I I don't know. That's like a really serious, dark conversation on what is kind of a lighter film. But
Yeah.
I think that the movie tries to make a point at the end, and so I wanted to at least address that. So,
Yeah.
do you have anything to add or say different on that?
But I mean, I think you hit right on the head. I mean, he doesn't really have any friends. I mean, you see him go to Butch's birthday party, and he's kind of the laughing stock because his dad gives him $6,
Yeah.
and he could. It's kind of laughable, but it and
Have you ever been to an amusement park by this? By the way, you literally pay per ride.
The only thing I can think of it is like the state fair kind of, which now they do wristbands at the fair now, but
Sure.
at one point I feel like they charged like tokens to get on, but it's kind of humorous because Preston gets 6 tokens.
Yeah.
And all the fun rides are like 7 tokens above. So he's riding like the carousel and other things like that.
He's 11, but he's riding like the 5-year-old rides. I did think that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, from the very beginning, you get two strong impressions, which pay off for the whole film. But he doesn't have any money. His family is kind of poor. Like they don't have a lot of stuff. He has a computer at home, which in '94, which would have been actually kind of hard. But other than that, they don't spend. They're on a tight budget. So you learn that, and then you also learn that these kids really aren't even his friends. Like if they were, they'd probably share their tokens with him or whatever.
Yeah. You would think that like. And the funny thing is, it's this Butch's birthday party, but you never see any parents. So you would think that, like, if my parents were throwing me a birthday party, they would at least give the kids, like, some tokens on top of that. But you just see the kids running free, and it's kind of like every kid for themselves, and every kid must be filthy rich except for Preston.
Yeah. Also, $7 to ride a roller coaster. I'm assuming it's a token for $1. So that's kind of pricey. But there's a lot of money issues, I think, with this movie in general. But that's the least of them.
Oh, yeah.
Funland is what it's called.
I do remember at Mall of America, at their amusement park, it actually costs tokens.
Yeah, you're right.
We just went there this past summer.
Yep.
And I just thought of that.
Yep, I've been there too in the last few years. But yeah, that's a weird place, man. It actually kind of resembles Funland, like a lot of the same rides. Mm-hmm. You got the spinny rides, you got the roller coasters, that kind of stuff. Mall of America is a weird place, man. So, and then talk about the cotton candy scene.
So, one of my favorite scenes to begin with, Preston is enjoying his cotton candy on this bridge that overlooks the like log type ride. And so all of Preston's friends are coming down, or so-called friends, and Preston's like waving at him, and then this huge wave just comes and basically drenches Preston, and his cotton candy's pretty much gone.
It's toast.
And
how could you not know that the wave's coming? By the way, he's kind of a dork.
Yeah,
like Preston's kind of a dork in this movie.
He is, and I mean, if you look at like the clothes he wears, I mean,
tucked in shirt.
Yep.
He's wearing a tucked in polo shirt with khaki pants to a birthday party. Like, this guy's kind of a nerd. So that's kind of how we're introduced to Preston at the beginning of the movie. The movie starts to get interesting when he's out for a bike ride, and we're actually introduced. The very first character we're introduced to in this movie, by the way, is Quigley. Mm-hmm. Like, it's in the opening credits,
and he's breaking out of jail.
Yeah, which that is such a weird scene to me that literally no one mentions that he's an escapee, like that he's being hunted by like local police or anything like that, or FBI. They're trying to crack down on this like money crime ring type of thing, but like there's nothing on the news about an escapee from the prison, or like no one is even aware that this guy's escaped. So it's kind of weird to show him escaping. I think they probably would have been better suited just showing him stealing money or something. But he breaks out of jail and gets this $1 million. He goes to the bank and he can't deposit it outright because of the serialization of the money, which I thought that was kind of cool to show that. But so he's going to launder it, and it's not explained how. It's not really important how, but he essentially it's going to get kind of filtered in maybe over many months or something slowly, kind of added to the bank's deposit. But the bank owner is corrupt, and he's basically saying, "Okay, I'm going to let you cash out $1 million of different bills than these bills, but you got to wait, give me 24 hours." Send your guy in tomorrow to do this, whatever. But it's on his way out. He gives him like a temporary, like little
checkbook,
yeah. And says like, okay, this will get you by for 24 hours if you need to spend some money. And he immediately runs over Preston's bike. Talk about that scene.
Which before that, Preston was going into the bank because he had just gotten a check from his grandma.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
This is kind of the first blank check, and
there's actually 2 blank checks in the movie.
His grandma doesn't write out the check amount, and Preston gets $11. So he brings this check in, and he's like, "I'd like to open an account." And that's when we get introduced to Shay, and she's like, "Well, you need at least $200 to open the account." And at that rate, he's not gonna have $200 very fast. So Preston's leaving the bank, and Quigley's also leaving the bank. And Quigley's on top of the world because he's about to get his $1 million. And Preston's on his bike. And then Butch comes along again and takes Preston's check. And so Preston and Butch are like racing after. And then as Quigley's backing out, Preston like wipes out on his bike. And Quigley doesn't hit Preston, but he completely runs over Preston's bike. So then Quigley gets out. And he's just like, "Are you okay, kid?" And he's kind of just about ready to just send him off, not do anything. And then Butch shows up and basically takes on the case of like a lawyer. And so Quigley's like, "Oh, crap," because people are starting to come around. And then he sees a police officer about to come in.
Yeah.
He's just like, he quickly fills out a check and leaves it blank. And he's like, "Show this to your parents and they'll know what to do."
Yeah.
And then he just takes off.
Yeah. I knew that this was going to be, because I'd read the synopsis right before the movie. I not even seen the trailer on this when I watched it, but I knew that someone was going to write him a check at some point. And then when the opening scene happens with the bank and the money, and I was like, okay, so he's going to get the money from this guy somehow. And then like he runs over his bike. I was like, this is where it happens, right? I was like, why is he just going to give him a blank check though? Mm-hmm. And then that question is answered when you see the police, the car come around. You're like, oh, he's in a hurry. And he just signs his name to the bottom and says, "Hey, give this to your dad. He don't know what to do with it." So,
and then Preston shows up at his house, and he basically gets lectured by his parents about how he was reckless and careless with his bike, even though it wasn't Preston's fault really at all.
Right.
So like Preston like storms off, and like we talked about earlier, he has a computer in his room, and I don't know how he knew how to do this, but I mean, he's definitely a smart kid.
Yeah.
And so he starts. At first, he's just going to write the check for $200 because that's probably, I mean, that's what he needed to open his bank account.
Sure.
But then he's like, And because like earlier, like a day before, he had figured out like how much it would take him to get to $1 million. And it says like 3,000
years,
some 100 years. And so he's like, And then he decides to write the check for $1 million.
Yeah. And prints it out so that it looks legit.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he actually at first he writes $1,000 because that's what Butch had said. Yeah, he said make the check out for $1,000. So yeah, he writes 1,000, and then he's like, and then he just adds three more zeros to it. So, anyways, so I guess the next thing that happens is he goes into the bank, right?
Yep. Like he goes back to the bank, and he doesn't get Shay as his teller this time. He gets an older lady.
I was fully expecting him to go in and talk to Shay again.
Yeah, and so the lady's just like, "Well, this has to be a joke," and Preston's like, "No, it's not." And then she sends him up to Bitterman, and
he's like the bank owner.
Yep. And then there's this scene where Bitterman's expecting Juice to come at 1:00, and it's a little before 1:00. But
by the way, there is a long string of coincidences that happen for this scene for it to make sense. It's a movie, I get it, but it like as you're watching this, you're like, "There's no way it would go down like this." Yeah. Like he's expecting someone to walk in at 1:00 on that next day. he's at one point says, "Are you juice?" Or he just says juice. He's like, "No, I'm not thirsty." But like, and then he just assumes, oh, he's just being funny. Like, there's all these things that have to line up for this to be like a perfect scenario. But I mean, you just go with it.
I mean, it's just kind of like he thinks of it as, oh, Quigley's gotten smarter now because nobody's going to expect a kid to come get his money. And so he literally is like, "Did you bring your backpack for this?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he literally just starts loading it. I mean, I would assume stacks of like $1,000 or something like that.
Which, by the way, the bank owner just has $1 million in cash in his office.
In his safe.
Okay, yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
And so he just starts loading him up. And then Preston gets out just in the nick of time because Juice is literally coming up the stairs. And he bumps into Preston and knocks the backpack off, but helps him out because he's thinking nothing of it.
Right.
And he just goes on.
Juice is like this typical kind of brutish kind of criminal kind of guy.
He's kind of
he's real
Quigley's
rough.
muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So like he's exactly who you're expecting to see at 1 o'clock. But then they end up just like literally passing each other in the hall. So yeah, that's how he gets away with it. He and I actually had a big smile on my face when he breaks into a run. So like he gets down to the bottom floor of the bank and sees the tellers wherever. He's like, "I'm gonna make it. Like I'm gonna make it out of this building with $1 million in my bag." And he just literally breaks into a sprint and just runs out. And I had a big smile on my face when I saw that. That was the moment of just like, whoa, like this is like a life-changing moment for him. So,
and then the irony of the house sale.
Yeah, what a weird deal. Okay, so I got to talk about this house. It's essentially a castle. It is literally called that. Like the real world, like where they shot this movie, which is in Austin, by the way. They shot it in Austin. The movie takes place in Indiana, but they found this castle in Austin that they wanted to shoot on. So, in fact, probably most of the shooting, I would say, is probably in Austin, Texas. But this castle is still there today. If you find, it's called the Pemberton Castle. It's PEMB, Pemberton. And today it's like completely covered in ivy. Like you can't even, like you would drive right past it and not even realize it's the castle from the movie unless you look really closely at it. It's completely green because it's just completely just covered in plants. So I don't know like why they couldn't sell this castle and keep it up or whatever, but there's no way, even in 1994 cash, that they have it listed on the market on when he pulls up the website for, which by the way, there's a website for this house in 94 is pretty impressive too. But like he pulls up the website and it says on there $200,000 is all they're asking for this thing. And I was just like, there's no way that thing's less than $1 million.
Yeah.
Like even in 1994 movie, money, today that house would absolutely be worth like $2 million. It's a massive thing. So
basically what's happening is Quigley is meeting with the realtor and it's like this older couple and he's given them an offer of like $150,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And and then Preston calls in but it's not Preston talking, it's his computer talking.
Yeah.
And they get,
which it sounds so terrible, by the way. It sounds like a computer.
And they get into this bidding war. And it looks like Preston's finally going to beat Quigley with no help whatsoever at around $200,000, and the people are ready to give it to him. But then Preston's mom calls and she's like, "I'm going to be home at 3." And then he's like, and then the realtor's like, $300,000, we'll take it. And he's just like, "Oh." And Quigley, of course, is mad because he wants that place for him as a hideout. And as he's leaving, he's like, "Well, you people probably won't even get to use this money because you're so old and you're going to die." Or something like that.
Yeah.
And so now Preston is the owner of this castle.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where Macintosh comes in because they're like, okay, well, Which, by the way, there's no way that he could. He says like, I'll pay such and such plus closing costs and stuff like that. And it's just like, don't you have to sign for houses like to actually take ownership? Anyway, there's a lot that you just have to not think about while watching this movie in order to enjoy it. Yeah. And kids aren't going to pick up on that stuff anyway. But the realtor over the phone is just taking this guy's word for it that he's going to pay this money, and is like, okay, well, what name should I put it under? And he's just like, because he can't use his name, and so he just looks down at the logo on his computer, and it's an Apple Macintosh is what he's using, which, by the way, as a longtime Mac user, like I remember using Macs back in the 90s, and it brought back so many cool memories of like floppy disks and stuff. Anyway, so he's using a program called Mac Speak, which was a real program back then that would like. It was text to speech back in the 90s, if you can believe that. And so, that was real technology that he used. But yeah, so he says, my name is Macintosh, and just that becomes this like fake persona for this person, the entire movie. So, then I don't know if I'm skipping anything, just let me know. But he basically kind of goes into like, 12-year-old with $1 million mode. Like he just starts buying everything. Like he finds Henry.
Yeah, the first thing he does is buys a limo driver.
Yeah.
And Henry shows up, and Henry's just like, well, this isn't true or anything. And then Preston just hands him money, and he's just like, okay, where are we off to? And then he goes into, I mean, he's 11 years old, so obviously there's a lot of stuff he wants. And he literally just goes out and starts buying a ton of stuff.
Yeah, they're basically shopping spree. Like he gets clothes. They're shooting. It's very 90s. They're shooting Nerf guns and super soakers in the stores. They he buys like a slide for their house. He's got a racetrack, which, by the way, like I'm totaling up all this stuff in my mind. And it's just like, man, I feel like he would have burned through $1 million on that first day. But I mean, the house alone, like he paid $300,000 for the house. That's 30% of his money gone. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, they're riding rollerblades in the middle of the store. They're looking at 4x3 TVs, and he says, "I want the entire wall," because he wants to build this wall of televisions in like the den or living room or whatever of this castle that he wants to live in. And he basically is just spending money left and right. And in fact, they kind of. I'm glad that at the end of the movie, somebody actually mentions how crazy that is. Like, it's actually from Quickly. He's like, "You spent $1 million in 6 days." And it's like, yeah, you're seeing it right on the screen. So, as far as like the just spendthriftness of this moment and like the stuff that he buys, like I think the water slide scenes are fun. The race car track is pretty fun. He has a what do you call it? Like
a batting cage.
Yeah. That he sets up. At one point, he has. Like literally the street is full of vendors that are carrying boxes. Like there's literally a box in everyone's hands. And there's like 30 people in the street.
And it's kind of ironic because literally this castle is right down the street from his actual house.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until that scene because the dad started going, what's all the ruckus? Like what's going on down here?
Yeah, and they're just like, and there's the scene where Preston's on top of the castle and his dad's like, what on earth is going on? And he's like, Macintosh is moving in. Well, who's Macintosh? Well, it's my boss. And he's just like bewildered. And so all Preston's dad is trying to do is get to their house. And so all of a sudden, Preston starts yelling and then they all like part.
Yeah.
And whenever he gets asked, it's all about Macintosh. And nobody ever thinks it's weird that he's not there.
Well, yeah, and okay, think about this for a second. So you're a dad, and you have an 11-year-old child, not a high schooler, an 11-year-old, what, 6th grader? How old are you when you're 11?
5th grade.
He's a 5th grader.
Yeah.
Working for a grown man, in a weird castle.
Yeah.
And you've never met him, and you're just letting your 11-year-old go to work every day for this guy and like manage all of his money. I was like, I mean, I know he thinks Preston's smart, but come on, like at least shake hands with the guy once, It's weird.
Yeah, and a day before this, he didn't have this job or anything, and all of a sudden he has a job.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear to even to his parents, Preston's parents, that he is literally like the not accountant, but like he's the money manager for this guy. And it's I think it's understood by some that he's just not in town half the time, or when he is in town, he's got more important business. He's basically Bruce Wayne, right? Like he's conveniently Bruce is always gone when Batman's on the prowl.
Yeah.
So they can kind of forgive that for to be fair, this movie takes place in 6 days, so it's not like weeks go by. But at one point, and again, they at least have the decency of addressing that weird question in everyone's minds. When at one point the dad and mom are talking alone in the kitchen, he's at the dining table, she's at the kitchen, and he says, she says, so when you met Macintosh, how was he or whatever? And he's like, well, I've never met him. He's like,
have you met him?
Yeah, have you met him? She's like, no, I've never met him. What do you mean you haven't met him? Like, it was just like this. Okay, well, at least they addressed that question. But
it's kind of like in Home Alone 2, where Kevin's on his own in New York. It's kind of like that with his dad's credit card, and everybody keeps asking to see his dad, and of course his dad's not there. And it's kind of just like Preston with Macintosh.
Yeah. No, it's pretty similar. So pretty. I mean, right around this time in the movie, I think it's probably appropriate to talk about it now. But there's a really weird relationship between this kid and this grown woman. So, and I have no idea. I was a kid in the 90s. I was an adult, but I would think that I would find this weird even in 1994 if I was 40 years old like I am now. But so this is essentially what happens, and I'm really not gonna try to overstate anything. I'm just gonna give you the facts and let you decide for yourself what you think is going on here. But so Shay is this, let's be honest, very beautiful woman that works. You think she's working for the bank.
As a teller. Yeah,
you find out very quickly she's undercover. She works for the FBI. Anyway, so that's what her interest is. At least they explain what her interest is in this kid, is work related. She's investigating. But from minute one, like when he first sees her, even when he's depositing $200, he's definitely attracted. Yeah. And I mean, at 11 years old, I guess I can buy that. I think I had like a crush on my teacher when I was in 5th grade too. So I get that. But then like she goes with him on this. So like there's a part where they're driving down the street. He rolls down his window and is like, "Hey babe," like not really, but like says that. And then he's like, "Hey, would you like to like go have dinner with me?" And she uses the words, "It's a date." And then they go out, just the two of them. She's trying to get to Macintosh, obviously, but she's like, "Okay, I'll go out on a date with you, 11-year-old child." And then they go out to like a fancy dinner. She wears that dress, which is kind of weird. Yeah. It's a dress that's definitely going to be provocative if you're the same age as her. He buys her jewelry. They go to this funny scene where like he pulls everything off the table and then he's like, "Hey, do you like burgers?" And she's like, "I love burgers." They go to his favorite burger joint. Then they go into the fountain and start like getting soaking wet together. And then they, I'm not trying to be salacious. I'm just saying this is what happens in the movie. She hugs him at one point. They're holding hands as they're getting soaking wet. And it's weird. Like it's already weird, and it gets weirder even at the end of the movie. But do you remember watching this for the first time and thinking that was weird? You were pretty young when you first watched it.
I honestly, I remember like big things, but I honestly did not remember this at all. Yeah. I mean, even when I watched it 3 years ago, but when we talked about doing this movie, I didn't really start thinking about it until we decided we were going to do this movie again.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is weird, and I don't know.
So I literally knew nothing about this movie. I didn't even know it was about a kid. You had told me about it several months ago, but I'd forgotten the synopsis, the brief synopsis that you gave me. So I literally thought this was about like a couple 20-year-olds or whatever. I just didn't know. And so I actually, in total innocence, I asked you the question a few days ago, "Is this a rom-com? Like what kind of movie is this?" And you were like, and like, ironically, it's kind of romantic. Like there's romantic scenes between these two people. It's just the fact that he's 11.
And like he, at the fancy restaurant, he has like questions for her.
Yes.
And it's like, are you married? She says no. How old was the youngest guy you've dated? How short was the shortest guy you've ever dated?
Yep.
And so you can really tell that Shay feels uncomfortable about it, but also that Preston's really into her.
And I almost, and not that this makes this okay, I'm just saying I think her motivation in this scene is obvious. I don't think the movie ever suggests that she is in love with him.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's all one-sided. I think that's clear. At the end of the movie, she actually says, when you're older, give me a call. Like, she's not interested in him right now. So I'm glad they at least did that. Otherwise, I don't think this movie would have made it to Disney Plus. But so she makes that pretty clear. But at the same time, kind of almost has to. She's not. Gosh, I don't want to say leading him on. I think that's also too far. But I think she is definitely not discouraging him from his infatuation with her.
She wants Macintosh,
Yes.
and that's all she wants.
Yes. And she's willing to do whatever it takes to get to Macintosh, including being ambiguous about her feelings for him.
Yeah.
And there were definitely moments, especially in those scenes, where I was just like, ugh, like, this is kind of gross. Like, it's not full on. If it was full on pedophilia, it wouldn't be on Disney Plus. And I think they stopped short of that, but ever so close to that line.
Yeah.
So it is, as far as movies go. We talked about what was the Alien movie? Oh my gosh! Oh, Flight of the Navigator. There's a scene that's very similar to this. It actually gave me Flight of the Navigator vibes, where there's a young child. I mean, the kid in that movie's a little older. He's probably 12 or 13 in that movie. But Sarah Jessica Parker in that movie is like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And so she's an adult. He's a minor, and he absolutely loves this girl and wants to like marry her. And she kind of goes with him a little bit too, and like is a little flirty. Like, and I think there are actually some lines even from her that are a little flirty.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it during that movie's review, and it's like I'm coming back around to it in this one. And those movies are pretty close to each other as far as the year that they came out. So I guess this was a little bit of a thing, like to address like unrequited, child to adult love,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I found it weird, and I thought it's at least worth mentioning that they went there, and they went further down that road than I thought they would. So it's interesting, but yeah, she becomes kind of not just a love interest. I mean, it's weird to think of her as a love interest, but she's essentially a love interest in the movie, but then also becomes kind of an advocate for him, and really like ends up like defending him at the end of the movie. So so she's pretty crucial. Let's talk about Henry a little bit. We'll get off topic from Shay. Henry is my favorite character in this movie, other than Preston. Obviously, Preston's everyone's favorite, but he's legit funny.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I was trying to think, he looks familiar. For a few seconds, I thought he was the counselor from Heavyweights.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're very similar
Yep.
in their demeanor, even the way they speak. They're both kind of Chris Farley-ish kind of characters. But he's not that guy. He's a different guy, but very similar to him. And I think he's legit funny. And I think isn't he like a stand-up comedian? I looked him up, and I think he's actually a stand-up comedian in real life, or was.
Yeah,
back in the 90s.
think you're right.
Do you have some like favorite lines or anything from him? I just really loved Henry. Anytime that he was on screen, I was like, okay, I'm in. I want to hear what this guy has to say next.
One of my favorite lines from Henry is when Preston is kind of lacking some confidence, and Henry's just like, you know what you have, Preston? Style.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of my favorite lines from him. And Henry's kind of maybe like the older brother type figure. Preston's brothers are not very nice to him at all.
Yeah.
But Henry's kind of there for him, and to a point. It's kind of one of those things where he's getting paid, so you don't know. But you definitely can tell that there's like a friendship beginning to bond between those two.
Yeah.
And Preston's getting like his first ever like real friendship.
Right.
From Henry.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing that Henry and Shay have in common in this movie, that I think that Shay actually says something very similar at the end of the movie, where he says, so that date that we went on, it was just for work, right? Like you went on the date because you had to for your job. And she's like, well, it sure started out that way, but then it became something more, and I wouldn't trade that night for anything. Again, hopefully not romantic feelings, but like that's what she's expressing about how important he is to her. And I feel like I got the same kind of vibe from Henry too, like where it started out being all about the money. Like he says, I'm not going to be your driver until he flashes dollar bills. And he's like, okay, I'm your driver. But then as they continue their relationship, it's only of course over the course of 6 days, but they become pretty fast friends, and it's not about the money anymore. Like he's just legit, like really good friends with this kid.
Yeah.
So,
and he's gained 2 friends that he's never had before.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, his only like real friend that you're ever introduced to is Butch.
Yeah.
And Butch is kind of that bully that yes, Henry or Preston likes to hang out with him because he wants to be popular, but Butch is not his friend at all.
Right. No, not even close. I found like a subtitle file or whatever. It has like all the quotes from the movie. I really liked this exchange. He does a little stand up in the middle of the film. It's actually when they're about to go into the party scene towards the end of the movie, which we're probably pretty close to anyways. He says, you ever heard more than one way to skin a cat? Who skins cats? Why would you skin a cat? And there is not more than one way to skin a cat. There's only one way. You grab the cat and you rip the skin off the cat. And then he says, kill 2 birds with one stone. You heard that one? You know anyone who's even killed one bird with one stone? Kids try it all the time. You can't hit a bird with a stone unless you got a huge stone and they're tiny baby birds. Then wham, beep beep, dead.
Yeah.
So he's genuinely funny. Any scene that he was in, I was usually smiling. I thought he was honestly funnier than the counselor dude in Heavyweights. Like I think he has like really good comedic timing, and he's very confident on screen.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd seen him in anything. Like he looks familiar, but I think it's just because he looks like other actors that I've seen. But he was great. I really enjoyed him a lot.
I think we probably need to talk about what like Bitterman, Quigley, and Juice have been doing this time.
Oh yeah.
Before we get to the party.
Yeah.
And they're basically doing whatever they can to find Preston, and they're not being successful at all. There's this one part right before the party that they actually find him at a park, and they
this is kind of like the big action scene in the movie.
Pursuing him.
Yeah.
And Quigley and of course Bitterman's not gonna chase after him because he's a bigger guy, and there's no chance that he's gonna catch him. So Quigley sends Juice after him. So Juice starts running after him, and at one point he knocks his backpack off, but they're all after Preston because they don't realize that all the money is actually in the backpack.
Yeah.
And so Juice is running after him, and it's kind of the comic scene you've seen in all the other movies where he's really trying, and there's this one part where he's got him on like this bridge, and Juice comes running and misses him by a mile and just falls in this pond. And then eventually Preston gets his backpack back, and they are chasing after him, and it's this kid on a bike, and the rest of them are in a car.
Yeah.
And they go across the stage, and Preston like goes flying, and they keep following him, and they literally land on top of these cars.
Yeah.
And so then they decide, well, this isn't working at all. So then they run into Butch again.
Yeah.
And they basically kidnap Butch. And there's this scene where they're on top of this high building.
Yeah, dude, that was so great.
And they're about to like throw him off this building.
It's literally a Batman scene where like he's suspending a criminal over the edge of a tall building.
But it's an 11-year-old kid. And so Butch is like, well, I'll tell you anything. His name's Preston Waters. And they go to his house, which the party's starting at this point.
Yeah.
And they literally kick down the door and nobody's home. So then they're just like, well, let's go over to McIntosh's and find him. And then, we're at the party scene.
Yeah. So this party, the price tag for this party alone is $100,000, which
Yeah.
is insane. But it looks like $100,000. I mean, they've got a live bands. They have obviously the bars stocked, which I mean, Preston can't drink any of that. But there's a ton of adults at the party, which is
Yeah.
a little weird. But like basically, they've just invited the entire neighborhood over, and it's all the things you would expect at like a really lavish party. It's kids going down the slide and like everyone's just playing with all of his toys.
Really
and stuff
fancy
like that.
tables, stuff like that.
Yeah, everyone's dressed to the nines. Like, yeah, it's just that big thing, whatever. And he's hired at like a party planner, basically, which I kind of like. I kind of liked her character too. She was pretty good, but she is like. She needs the money at the party, which I thought was kind of weird. But like, she's like, but it's basically a plot device to get you to say like, okay, like a demand to see Macintosh now.
Yeah.
Like she's finally like the one person that's like, I have to see him right this minute because I have a bill, and it's $100,000. He goes back to his mega computer on this huge screen or whatever, and starts totaling it all up. And I took a screenshot of that screen or whatever. So he spent like $23,000 on the security system, $35,000 on video system, $26,000 on the racetrack, which seems low to me.
Yeah.
Only $26,000 for a racetrack. It's 1994 money, but it's not that different. Batting cage was $12,000. This line is really funny. Coca-Cola, Haagen-Dazs, Charles Chips, and Nabisco, $4,936.
Yeah.
Slush puppy machine. Then there's a line in here that says Plan 442, and he mentions that at the dining room table, which we skipped over that scene. But in the midst of all this, he actually is still having dinner with his family and stuff. Like, albeit like in a suit, But and he says, "Oh, so much for Plan 442." Did they ever explain what that is in the movie?
Mm-mm. You just find out that his dad's working on that for some point, but he never goes into what it is.
What a weird.
And Preston's gonna present it to Macintosh,
Right?
But
we never find out what it is.
No.
That's a weird deal, man. Like,
because you don't even really find out what his dad actually does.
I feel like something got left on the cutting room floor there, like that they were going to make a scene, a whole big 5-minute deal about Plan 442, but it just got cut from the movie, I guess. It's so weird that it's mentioned but never addressed. It's even on the screen. He spent $300,000 on Plan 442. Is that the house?
It could be.
It's, you know what? That's got to be it, because the house isn't on here at all.
Yeah.
I bet Plan 442 is the house. That was literally never explained, but it just connected to me because it was the dollar amount. That's weird. Like, why didn't they explain what Plan 442 was?
I don't know.
Unless I just missed it. Anyway, there's also a line in here that says round trip to Chicago. That's never shown on screen. Mac Kids Park is $40,000. The virtual reality was $30,000, which is crazy. The slide was $12,000. Anyways, it totals all this up, and then he adds $100,000. Actually, on screen it only says $10,000, so he actually didn't put enough zeros. Anyway, $100,000, and basically he's out of money. So he's burned through $1 million in 6 days.
And he literally finds out that he only has $332 left.
Right.
And so he can't pay the party planner. And she, of course, is mad because she wants to get paid. And she literally shuts down the whole party.
Yeah. Shut down the bar. Everyone get out of here. Leave.
And then you kind of have this scene that we talked about earlier with his dad. Comes in. And it's not supposed to be funny whatsoever.
No, it's a pretty serious scene.
And his dad just wants him to come home. Because, ironically, Macintosh and Preston have the same birthday. And all his family wants to do is have him come home for his birthday.
Yeah.
And
I thought that was a pretty heartwarming scene.
Yeah.
There's actually a scene, I don't think a tear goes down his face or anything, but there's he can't speak because he's supposed to be Macintosh, but he whispers, he's like, I want to come home, Dad, or whatever. I was like, I got a little emotional. I was just like, oh man, like you could see it on his face. Like he legit like misses his family, misses that life.
And he literally starts chasing after his dad.
That's right.
Which his dad must have made quite the
really good time.
Quick exit. And so he runs to the door and somebody's knocking on the door and he's like, oh, it's got to be my family. And nope.
It's Quigley and his boys.
Yep.
Juice and Bitterton, all
Yep.
all three of them. And then it goes full Home Alone at that point. Like it's not Home Alone. It is doing its own thing, but
he hasn't really planned anything out at all.
He doesn't have paint cans that are going to swing from the ceiling or anything. But yeah, he. Okay, so let's talk about all three attacks. So Bitterton is the virtual reality. He throws the headset on him and confuses him
and like throws him. He's got like this asteroid that, or I don't even know what it is. It hangs from the ceiling and he puts him inside of it. And so that's Bitterman. And then Juice, Preston runs away and goes down a slide. So of course they're going to send Juice down.
Yep.
And what's he end up doing? Oh, he gets Juice in the batting cage.
Oh, right.
And starts throwing stuff at him and everything.
Yep.
And then
I thought the most clever one was Quigley.
Yep.
So he gets him in that hamster wheel ball.
And he basically he gets in his go-kart and basically starts pushing this hamster ball.
Yeah.
And then he pushes him off a ramp all the way into his swimming pool. And the cage breaks open, which I don't really think that would happen from the collision with the pool.
Not an impact like that.
So then Preston goes to Quigley and he's trying to see if he's alive and everything, and Quigley like grabs him. And you finally think Quigley's finally gonna give Preston what he deserves.
Yeah.
And then the FBI shows up.
Yeah. So it's Shay and I forget the other guy's name, the guy that's been helping her in the van, but it's the whole FBI shows up. Riggs, that's right. And guns drawn, like they're like, okay, everyone, hands on your head or whatever. And she's still demanding to see McIntosh. Like all this time, like no one's figured this out. Like that he's not a real person. And
like before this, Quigley and Behrman had discussed. Yeah. Well, nobody's seen this McIntosh, so you could take this persona and be McIntosh. And Quigley's starting to like the idea of that, but the only thing standing in his way is Preston, and so they're trying to get rid of Preston. And then all of a sudden, they're surrounded, and Quigley says he's McIntosh, and he wants everybody off of his property.
Right.
And Shay's just kind of like, "You're McIntosh?" And he's like, "I'm McIntosh." And Juice says he's McIntosh, and Bitterman says he's McIntosh. And then they literally arrest him because of money laundering and some other charges.
Yeah, I'm sure he has a pretty long list.
Yeah. And then, I mean, obviously this guy got thrown away probably for good because they probably figured out that he's an escaped convict too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he had a list about a mile long of crimes he had committed.
Then
then we get to the
one of the last scenes in the movie. The very last scene is the birthday thing, which we kind of already talked about. But I have to read this review that I found online about this. So there is a very heartwarming scene between Shay. It has to end somewhere, right? So like they can't just walk off into the sunset together and get married. Like they have to split up somehow. So Shay, who's been again the love interest for this movie, at the end of the movie, they're having this like really close, like they're talking very close to each other, whispering comments of affection for each other, and I was like, where's this gonna go? Like are they gonna like kiss? Like I mean whatever. And then sure enough they kiss at the end of the movie, and it's not like
a peck on the cheek or anything.
No,
like that.
And it like I have a picture of it. She kisses him in between the top lip and the nose, so it's like above his lips. But come on, it's essentially a kiss on the lips from a grown woman. This is what this reviewer said. It says, this isn't like Big, where the movie Big, where the woman thinks she's kissing a grown man. This is a grown lady, an FBI agent, full-on mouth kissing a 12-year-old, he says 12-year-old, but 11-year-old child who is also related to her investigation. How is this okay in any universe? I am still grossed out watching this. So yeah, it is a weird place to end this film on that kiss, but I think this might be one of the only on-screen kiss, like somewhat romantic kisses between a grown woman or a grown adult and a child in a movie. So you can watch it on Disney Plus if you want to see that.
And it's kind of weird. And like I had talked about earlier, I saw this movie in like the early to mid 2000s.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember this at all. But then now, and like even when I watched it 3 years ago, I didn't remember it. But I mean, this is like in 2020 now. This is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Really weird.
I would like to think it was just as weird in the 90s, but it may not have been.
Yeah.
That was a different time back then. I mean, obviously, pedophilia has always been wrong. Even in the 90s, it was wrong and illegal. But I don't know that people would have thought too much about just a kiss. Like, it's not as egregious as you could be. So like, I don't know how it got through and how it got by, but it is really strange in 2020, especially with just the way that how sensitive our country is right now. And sometimes for really good reasons, but like, I think people are just really sensitive to anything that's a little taboo. And this is like, the taboo meter is like flying on this one.
And this is a legitimate Disney movie. Like Disney made this movie. It's not one of those where another company that Disney bought along the way ended up making this movie. Disney made this movie.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a weird one. Right after the kiss, she says, he says, so he's basically going to try to get with her, and she says, how about we have another date in about 10 years? And he says, how about 5 or whatever? And she says 7. He's like, how about 6? And she's like, okay, 6. And I was like, wait, he's 11. Like 6 years, he's only 17.
Yeah. So he still wouldn't be of age.
It's like, what are you doing, Disney? This is super weird. So I guess she's going to date him when he's a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Like beginning his senior year in high school. So, anyways, and she's got to be, I mean, I don't know how old the actress was. She's got to be in her
late 20s.
I was going to say mid 20s, maybe late 20s. So, I mean, by the time he's even 17, like she's in her 30s now.
Yeah.
So it's now you've got a 32-year-old woman dating a 17-year-old. It's super weird. It's no matter what lens you or what decade you watch this movie, and it's weird.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that it got through certification. So
yeah.
Anyways, so that's kind of Blank Check. We kind of already talked about the end about the heartwarming scene. With the birthday and the wish and everything. And he actually like wishes for Shay. I think it's kind of implied at the end. He's thinking about Shay and he's like, okay, I'll wish for her. Anyway, I didn't mean to end on a negative. I think overall I'm pretty positive on the movie.
Yeah.
It's a fun watch. Like I said, it's literal child fantasy. I'm 40 years old, but even I enjoyed watching it, thinking like it brought out the kid in me watching it. Like if I was a kid, I probably would have made a lot of the same choices as him. I feel like there are some weird things and things that don't make sense, like how did an 11-year-old buy a house and stuff like that. But if you're willing to look past some of those obvious glaring ones, for the most part, the movie, you strip those away, the movie's surprisingly grounded. Like it kind of makes sense, like the way things happen, and you kind of buy the fact that this, not for 6 months, but for 6 days, like that this could actually happen.
Oh yeah,
that it could pull this off if they got really lucky and then pulled all the right strings in the right order. And the characters are genuinely likable. The bad guys are genuinely hateable. Like I think they did a lot of things right with it. There's some really funny scenes and some funny lines. There's actually a line and there's some cute lines too from him, like an 11-year-old child. Things that he's trying to be an adult, but he doesn't understand a lot of the things of what it takes to be an adult. Like I don't even think he knows what closing costs are, but he knows to say that. And so there's a scene where it's during the date scene or whatever between him and Shay, and she says she's trying to get information out of him about Macintosh, and she says, so is he an entrepreneur? And he's like, no, he's an American. And I had to just chuckle and laugh at that. I was just like, that is a classic line from the exactly what you would expect from an 11-year-old kid.
Yeah.
So,
and one of my favorite lines, which, I mean, it truly shows that Preston doesn't have any true friends at the beginning of the movie. Whenever he shows up at Butch's birthday party, Butch literally like, which I don't even know why Butch invited him. He's like, it's Presto the Pesto.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe Butch and Preston were like childhood friends, like really early on, and their parents were really good friends, and that's why he got invited. But I mean, it truly shows that he does not have any true friends.
Yeah.
Before this whole thing happens.
Yeah, and that series of lines that I was quoting from Henry, where he's talking about birds with one stone or whatever, that was the tail end of a conversation where they were talking about a fool and his money are soon parted. That was like the other colloquialism that he was talking about, and he was like, well, what does that mean? And he's like, actually, I'm not sure I know what it means, but then he figures it out pretty quickly. He's like, oh, I think it just means that if you have a lot of money, that money's going to be gone someday, and then when your money's gone, your friends are gone too.
Yeah.
And you actually see exactly that at the end of the movie. Like, they leave the Henry thing kind of up in the air. Like, you kind of assume that they'll see each other around, but they're not. He also has like a full-time job, and he can't just hang out with them all the time. Yeah. But that they genuinely are friends. And then, of course, Shay has that weird thing where I'll date you in 6 years. But like, he's made a couple friends along the way, but I think the movie is pretty clear about like he didn't make any lifelong friends, even though he got $1 million overnight. So
it really comes down to that his family is his true friends.
Yeah. It's a good movie with a good. The premise is really incredible. Like if you just read the synopsis, you're like, okay, I'm intrigued. This is cool.
Yeah.
It's funny. The characters are great, and then it's got some like legit themes, and the moral of the story is really clear at the end of the movie. So, I was glad I watched it. I don't know that I'd ever heard of this movie. Like, even watching the first 20 minutes of the frames of this movie, I was like, I don't think I've seen any of these frames in any trailer ever. So I guess I just missed it when it came out. I would have been perfect age for it. I was 14 when it came out. So I don't know how I missed this one, but it's worth a watch. So I think you just really have to look past the semi pedophiliac moments in the film, because it's more aggressive than you think it's going to be when you actually get there. So, and
it kind of fits the genre of like Richie Rich and Home Alone, like we talked about.
I've not seen Richie Rich. I have seen Home Alone.
But I mean, it's not. You need to expect like it's semi like those movies, but I mean, it's not as good. But I mean, I'd still say it's worth watching.
Oh yeah. I mean, once she's old enough, I'll probably have Jordan watch it. I think she'll really enjoy it. So, definitely I recommend from both of us. So cool. Before I forget to mention this, I want to talk about what else have you been watching on Disney Plus here in a second, so you might think of that. But next week, so whenever there's new content that we're really excited about, like we did Artemis Fowl last week, I want to make sure we're covering that. So everyone knows, if you're a Disney Plus subscriber, you know it's coming. The big thing next week is Hamilton. So it drops on July 3rd. We need to kind of talk about like how, like our schedule, like if we can cover it next weekend, or if it needs to be Monday or whatever. But it's pretty safe to say that the next episode you'll see in your feed is going to be Hamilton. Yep. So definitely watch that when it comes out on July 3rd. I know everyone's really anticipating this film. The only thing that I've heard about Hamilton is that they're neutering some of the language. I think you were the one that told me that. So there are some like F-bombs and stuff. Yeah. In the musical.
It might not be appropriate for the kids. And
no.
I know it was in the contract that Disney Plus was not going to put it on unless they bleeped out those.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they treat that. Like if they have them say a different word instead of like the F word, or if they have them say the F word and then just bleep out the audio of it, but you can see them mouthing the F word in their mouth. I'll be interested to see how they treat that. But
because like Caitlin and I,
that shows you how much they wanted this movie. By the way, the fact that they're like, they look at Deadpool and they're like, nope, not going to come onto the service, but we'll have Hamilton come on, which has a lot of the same language in it.
And like Caitlin and I have never seen Hamilton before. We obviously know what it is because it's a super popular Broadway show.
Yeah.
But like, if you go on Spotify, about 50% of their songs are explicit on Spotify.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I would definitely say that Hamilton probably is not kid friendly.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that it's on the service at all, to be honest. Again, that shows you how much they were dying to have this thing on their property. So I've already seen commercials on television for it. They know this is a big thing. Like, other than Mandalorian season 2 and maybe the Marvel stuff, the WandaVision and like what's the other
Winter
one?
Soldier.
Yeah, Winter Soldier. That's coming out this year. This is kind of, I mean, I think Artemis Fowl was supposed to be that, but then the reviews have not been kind to that movie. But I think even Disney knows that this is kind of their big thing, especially for the summer. Like, this will be their big release.
And it comes out right on 4th of July weekend. So
a lot of people will be watching it. I anticipate it'll get great reviews just because it's just the musical. Like, it's the Broadway hit that everyone loves. So unless it's just really poorly shot, like cinematography is bad, I can't imagine it getting bad reviews because people love the musical. I'm like you guys, I've not seen it. I've actually never even heard any of the songs, which
I haven't either.
Has Caitlin been listening to the songs? Is she going to be familiar with anything?
No.
Okay, so we'll come in fresh.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see what it's like.
Yeah, I am too. So the plan right now is to have both of you guys on, so all three of us on the show next week. If anyone else wants to come on, I'm not going to tell them no. So, but at the very least, we'll have three of us on to talk about Hamilton next week. So that'll be a mega episode. What else have you been watching on Disney Plus? Anything you guys have been popping on recently?
We're still on the Hannah Montana train.
Of course.
We're like 3/4 of the way through season 2.
Okay.
So we still watch an episode here and there. There's 4 seasons of that, so I would assume we'll probably be done with it close to the end of the summer. And we watched Artemis Fowl whenever that came out.
What's your like 2-minute review on that?
I feel like the cast was good.
Yeah.
But I feel like there were parts where they tried to be like Harry Potter, but it's nothing like Harry Potter. So, I mean, overall, I'm intrigued because there's 8 books?
Yeah, and supposedly this movie, we had a great discussion, me and Jack, last week. Jack actually read the first 3 books.
Okay.
I think he's read the first book like 3 times over. So he's pretty familiar with the source content. From what I read online, this movie that just came out covers the first 2 books.
Okay.
But he was saying that it was really more like 1.5, like it went halfway through the second book. So how many more movies are left? I would say if they were going to do all of them, which who knows, because the thing has like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. So who knows if they'll make any more. But if they do, I would say there's maybe 6 more movies. So
I mean, overall, I found it enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, would I go back and watch it like instantly? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd say it's worth watching if you have not watched it before. I mean, I feel like kids would. I mean, maybe like close to like 8 or 9-year-old kids would enjoy it. But I mean, I'd say it's good for like one watch at least.
Yeah. We're not going to get into spoilers here just because not everyone's had a chance to see it. But I would say, if you're wondering what should I see it or not, I think Grant and I are going to agree you should watch it.
Yeah.
I think it's enough of a zeitgeist kind of movie where a lot of people are watching it and you kind of want to be a part of that conversation. But also just because that book is pretty important to young adult YA type novel stuff. And so if you've ever been curious, I think it's worth at least 2 hours of your time. You're not going to read the entire book in 10 hours, but you can watch the movie in 2. Actually, it's only an hour and a half long. And the enjoyable part of the movie will stick with you, and the parts that are just kind of dumb and throw away, you won't even remember those anyway. So it's worth a watch. So cool. Anything else you guys are
we're excited, or I'm excited at least, because also I believe on July 3rd, when Hamilton comes out, they're also releasing the first Mighty Ducks, which it's the first Mighty Ducks is probably my least favorite of the 3.
Interesting.
But at least they're starting the ball rolling, because like 2 and 3 probably won't be very far behind. So that's coming on. And then the Big Green, which is basically like the Mighty Ducks, but the soccer version of that comes on. I think it's July 3rd as well.
Okay.
So I'm excited for those 2. I enjoy both of those movies.
Okay.
So
you might come consider coming back on to talk. I would love to talk either one of those.
Yeah.
I know this pains you for me to remind you of this, but I've only seen the first Mighty Ducks, and I don't remember it. And I don't think I've ever seen The Big Green either. So those sports movies are gaping holes for me. I have never watched them. So, and I think it's fair to mention at this stage, I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and I'll mention it again next week, but I think Jack is going to take some time off from the podcast. He's got just a lot of other irons in the fire going on in his life right now. He's super busy. So that probably means having Grant on more often as you want to come on. I know it's probably just limited to the summer, but as often as you want to come on, you're always welcome. I'll be looking to have some other guests on if Grant or Caitlin can't be on. They're going to be on next week and then may not be on after that. But, Jake was a great guest. Jerry's been a great guest. And some other people that I'm thinking about having on as well. So you'll hear more of Grant than we normally would, just because we're taking a break. Jack's taking a break as far as co-hosting. So your comments about like movies that are finally coming to Disney Plus is a great transition into what we watched. So last night was movie night for our household. We do Friday night movie night. And I pulled up Disney Plus. I was like, oh, I wonder what you haven't seen yet. And we just kind of scroll through and like, okay, you haven't seen that one. You haven't seen that one. And then inevitably she picks something that she's already watched before. No matter how many times we try to corral her into watching something new, she doesn't always go there. You can lead a horse to water. But anyway, she, on the very first homepage, she goes, "What's that one, Daddy?" And I said, Tarzan. Yeah. Tarzan came to Disney Plus. I was like, yes, I love this movie. Came out in '99. I was in college. Like, I was like, this is a great movie. And we watched Jungle Book like a week ago. And I was like, how do I describe this movie? I was like, well, it's not unlike Jungle Book. Like, it's about this human child that gets raised by animals, And so, and then it quickly diverges from Jungle Book after that. But yeah, so I was like, let's watch the trailer. And I found this old, like 4x3, like square trailer on YouTube. And she goes, I want to watch that. And we're like, sweet. So we put that on and I watched it. I'll be honest, Grant, half the time that we have movie night, I'm not even watching the movie because it's a movie I've seen 30 times or it's a movie I just don't care to watch. I watched every frame of Tarzan last night. I freaking love that movie. Yeah, it's that's so a good one. It's so good. Yeah. The music is fantastic. It's all Phil Collins, except for Trash in the Camp, which is a great scene. Yeah. Trash in the Camp is basically... what's that show that you can see in Vegas that's like street sweeping, like
Stomp.
Trash in the Camp is basically Stomp for like 3 minutes in the middle of the movie where they're just banging on pots and pans and stuff and they make a song about it. And the Minnie Driver is freaking perfect as Jane in this movie. Like, she epitomizes that character perfectly. Yeah. Perfect. And Rosie O'Donnell as the sidekick is super funny. She's very similar to the parrot character in Aladdin, Iago. Yeah. She's kind of an Iago character, but way more fleshed out, way funnier in my opinion. And the guy that plays Tarzan, he's kind of a one-off actor, I think, but that's probably reductive. He's probably been in a bunch of stuff I've never seen, but he is really fantastic as this person that's learning English and going from gorilla talk to human talk and like in between and stuff like that. And I think the premise and the moral of the story is very fleshed out really well. The animation for 1999, this movie came out 21 years ago and it looks like it was animated today. Yeah. It looks absolutely fantastic. There are some of the flashiest, fastest action scenes I've ever seen in a movie. It's every bit as good. The action scenes are just as fast and just as fluid as anything you've seen in the Incredibles movies. So yeah, if you haven't watched Tarzan, do not sleep on that one. I don't know if this is a popular Disney movie for them. It's not a princess movie. It's not even a musical. There's music in the movie, like awesome, like songs that you've heard a million times on Pandora, but no, they're not sung by any of the characters. So it's odd as far as a Disney animated feature goes. But it is easily top 10 for me as far as animated. It's so good. So we watched that last night. I had not seen it in probably at least 10 years. And all the same emotions came flooding back. I love that movie so much.
That's a good one.
So yeah, that's what we've been watching. I don't even remember what we watched on Tuesday night. but it might not have even been a Disney film, to be honest. But yeah, Tarzan was the hit this week. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was happy to get into that. Cool. Well, I think that's it for this episode. It's been a nice long episode. If you have an idea of what you want to hear about on this podcast, something you want us to review or talk about, something, or you just want to give us your 2-minute review of something you've watched on Disney Plus, hit us up at disneyplusreviews@hotmail.com. We'd love to include you in the show, whether it be an audio file or just something you write out and I can read on the show. That would be great. Again, like we said earlier, next week is going to be Hamilton, and then the week after that, we'll figure it out. But Grant has given me a long list of movies that I need to see, and whether or not he's on the show to talk about them or not is up to him. And I'll talk about it with somebody. So I don't know, maybe the first Mighty Ducks movie or something like that. So. Anyways, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Grant, for being on the show.
Yeah.
Today. It was fun.
It was good.
I love talking about Blank Check with you.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week for Hamilton. That's going to be a good time.